seven gear. I mean,
good morning, Bucknutters. Legit. It is Tuesday, December 9th, 2025. Still, I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and Change. I'm joined by Garrick Hodge and Mark Porter. Apparently, there was a football game over the weekend, and there's some other goings on we're going to discuss. But we're going to break down the game that we just saw a little bit. Mark's video from the first half is up. The second half will be coming, and you'll get a window into the film. We will know exactly why things went wrong. We have not had a film where we focused on as much negativity as we did, partially because, the Buckeyes didn't lose for over 365 days, so that made for a pleasant review. We're also going to take a look back at signing day. We went on Wednesday last week, not Thursday, to kind of preview it, and then we'll do kind of a general review and how that applies going forward. Normally, we'd start with Mark, but Garrick was in the house shooting camera for the game, shooting pictures for the game for us. Not what you expected, Garrick. Now that you've had a few days to kind of soak it in, your thoughts on what you saw there, your perspective on the game. Do you have anything to share that no one else has shared yet?
I don't know about nobody else has shared, but I will say, I'll take a 30,000-foot view just from the being there perspective. There were more Ohio State fans there than I thought there were going to be. I thought, with Indiana, this being their Super Bowl, it being right in their backyard, tickets going for unholy prices on the secondary market. Get in the door price was around $650. I expected this to be 75% Indiana fans, and it was probably more like 55-45. There was a good contingent from Ohio State fans, and honestly, when there were calls made by officials, or I guess calls not made by the officials, you couldn't really tell who was cheering for who. You usually got a fair and split even gripes or cheers. But in terms of the game itself, I said it last time we talked, guys. I thought the bigger story of the game wasn't if Ohio State could get pressure on Fernando Mendoza. I thought it was if Indiana could get pressure on Julian Sayin, and boy, did they ever. That interior defensive line is legitimate. I think that Indiana proved that they are true national title contenders. If you don't believe that they are now, just look to Saturday. That's not to say that Ohio State couldn't fare well against them if they were to match up again. And I'll also say it was probably an imperfect storm of events for Ohio State in that whole week leading up to it. When you factor in that Ryan Day had to spend a lot of time talking to Chris Henry Jr., talking to other wide receiver recruits, considering the departure of Brian Hartline, that's another imperfect storm of events. Your offensive coordinator leaves a few days before the Big Ten title, and that's not to begrudge him. That's just the way the calendar works out, right? You got to do what you got to do. There's speculation Matt Patricia interviewed with Penn State. So maybe not 100% of the focus was on Indiana. And frankly, guys, from my perspective, it kind of felt more like an NFL game than it did a true conference championship. That's not to delegitimize the Big Ten title. I'm not trying to say that the game didn't matter. It would have been nice to put a Big Ten championship trophy in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Certainly not trying to say the game didn't matter. But I almost just felt from a call perspective, how the game was called. All the players played hard, not trying to say they didn't. It meant a lot to them. But it just kind of felt like they were maybe saving a little something. And again, I'll go back to the first point. Give Indiana credit, man. That defense brought it. Fernando is a hell of a competitor. I was really impressed by some of the throws he made. He was the first quarterback, in my opinion, that Ohio State has played that could fit throws into tight windows, at least with that defense, that no other quarterback could make that they faced to that point. And sometimes you just got to tip your cap. You got to review the film, which Mark will do for us, and move on. But that game didn't make me think that Ohio State is any less of a national championship contender than it already is. And clearly the committee thinks as much. They only fell to the number 2 seed. They have a clear path to repeating as national champions. I don't think Texas A&M or Miami would scare me as much as Indiana would. We'll see. We'll obviously have time to delve into those matchups. But honestly, my biggest takeaway, yes, there are some disappointing things that happen on Ohio State's end with those last two offensive drives when you drive all the way down to the red zone and you get 0 points. That's the game right there. It's disappointing to miss a chip shot field goal too, but honestly, I'll jump on the bandwagon as the rest of Ohio State fans. Why didn't you go for it on 4th and 1 in the first place down there? Maybe they just wanted to tie the game and they got a little spooked by the last result of the 4th and 1 on the drive before. But nonetheless, I think it can turn into a positive because, number one, it wasn't Michigan. So there's a lot less negativity being harped on that. If you guys remember, a 13-10 score last year before the playoffs started turned out quite well for them. And if you think about it, losing 13-10 makes you really do an honest self-assessment and look in the mirror and try to clean things up for the playoff run. Whereas if they scored down there and win 17-13, maybe they don't do that honest self-assessment. I'm sure they would, but it doesn't quite ring the same when you win or just skid by the skin of your teeth than it does than when you come out on the losing side and you honestly have to do a really honest self-assessment of how you performed. And anyway, to sum up, my concern meter is not very high. And honestly, guys, I'm more impressed by Indiana than anything. I mean, think about where they were 2 years ago. Just build a statue for Curt Cignetti already outside of Indiana's. He is unquestionably the best coach in Indiana history. And that's wild to say after 2 seasons of being there and as long as Indiana has been around.
Slight indictment, I would say, of the Indiana historical achievement factor, but accurate. Mark, your general thoughts before we get to the film.
Yeah, hats off to Indiana. I like how Garrett made sure that was a clear statement that they did play great. Mendoza is the real deal. Those throws are legitimate throws. He's going to be an NFL quarterback for sure. Dan asked a question like week 3, like what team on the schedule coming up worries you? And, it was kind of like a trap question. Well, and it wasn't a team that worried me. It was a confluence of events or a situation that comes up, and it happens to every team that's in an undefeated season or on a run, where this game just is built where things can go off the rails and the clock can run and first downs and turnovers or whatever. But this was that game. And Garrick, I'm glad you pointed out that it was a big recruiting week. I mean, signing day and all the other things. Now, I think this was a trap game from the sense that all of our chips were pushed to the middle against Michigan. And this is going to make some Ohio State people mad, but Michigan was no different than Rutgers or Maryland. They weren't that great. There was nothing special about them. It should have been a normal Big Ten win, but you surrounded it with this fear and, the fans leading up to it. Oh my gosh, can we win? And yeah, you're going to win. It was the only game I bet all year. That's how sure I was you were going to win.
Allegedly.
Okay? And it was like the culture of Ohio State had this in the team and the coaches, and I get it. And it's the way you had to treat the Michigan because you had to win. But I think there was so much focus put on that I said it earlier in the year, and I laid breadcrumbs on this channel a bunch, like, hey, Indiana guys, hey, Curt Cignetti guys, like, don't we're not talking about it, but that's the game coming up. And I think, you lose at 13-10 after all that, and you probably shouldn't have done some of the things you did with the 4th downs. You could have replayed those downs in the game. Like you're saying, Garrett, you come out with the win and you don't self-assess. Play the podcast last year after we lost to Michigan. I said, this is exactly what you need to win the national championship. And again, this is exactly what you need to restart your season over. It's like almost a kick in the teeth, and you have, a 4-game season now, and you have that fresh feeling of self-assessment. And that's not the worst thing in sports. It hurts. I mean, it hurts to watch that game, that feeling of helplessness where you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to happen again, and we didn't get it. I know that for these fans, that's a hopeless feelings. And you can see the finger pointing going on in the comments and the finger pointing on the message boards. I did something during this game that I've never done before. I brought my son over to the message boards and I said, look at this game thread. It goes from page 88 to page 95 to page 106. I go, the comments are so fast and furious when we're losing. It's insane.
Does he still want to play football after that?
Yeah, it's like, and you know what? That's the culture of Ohio State. You win every game. You make it an unquestionable win. We're fans that we don't tolerate losing. And when you take the job here, that's part of it. So as it goes off the rails, even by the littlest amounts or fractional amounts, you see the fans looking for like, this can't be happening. It does. It's just a confluence of events that creeps up on a lot of great teams, and it doesn't preclude them from winning the national championship. I know that was long-winded, but I'm one to think that this bump in the road will be a benefit to us, and I'm not just saying that. I said it last year. So we can put in the tape if you want, Dan, and we can get into that. Or I know you might want to comment on what we just said.
I think I agree with both of you. I'll say this. I don't like losing, obviously. It did not feel like the last loss at 13-10. It did not feel close to that. First of all, I was indoors and near a bathroom. The last time we lost, I was going to, anyway. And I don't think there's any question about this. The next, let's say, given the extended break you have before the playoff game, it's certainly better to have lost and have a little motivation during that rather than have guys like me talk about how you're at the zenith of the program, you're the best ever, all that stuff. So losing stinks. And I think the guys have said very well, we've already seen Ohio State recover from a loss and use it constructively. And I don't think this one left quite the mark. And actually this game, I think, was even, you're one or two plays away. The Michigan game, I get it. There was some cosmic influence on that thing that will never be able to be explained. Algorithms, dogs and cats living together kind of thing.
Really quick, I will say, being there and being on the sidelines, in the fourth quarter, for me, it just turned into people watching for Curt Cignetti. That guy lost his marbles almost after every other call, especially
during the fourth quarter.
Oh yeah, especially when Ohio State got down there in the red zone on that last drive, and they were just running the ball and moving on him. Curt Cignetti just flagged down an official, started screaming words that we can't say on a family show, made a signal for this, and then he's like, that's two, and then you can guess what name he called the official. So just for everyone, it was not just the Ohio State coaches that had a problem with the officiating on Saturday, and to their credit, it was not the best officiated game on both sides of the ball. But
I don't want to hear about holding calls.
Oh, for sure.
Because there's literally statistical evidence to show that Ohio State just doesn't get holding calls. God forbid we put NFL linemen after NFL linemen up there against guys who don't make it, yet somehow they're able to block them without holding them for a decade. But we digress. Mark, let's go to the tape before I lose my cool here. Again, Buckeye in the Sky, first half. Now, keep in mind, people, this was not focused much on the good. There wasn't a ton of it. There's a lot focused on pass protection, which obviously was a big issue. And Mark, if you could kind of focus on the sacks in general and what went wrong, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll get into some of this tape. And early in the game, I don't think Ohio State truly had a beat on this defense. And, let's talk about cover 2 and cover 4. You see this cover 2, cover 4 show. And a lot of times you can't tell if these corners are going to bail out of here and play cover 4, or they're going to stay up and play in your face and play the flats. Okay. So lining up here, and I know they saw on tape, how they roll this coverage, but this coverage rolled to cover 3 out of cover 4 a lot. And they did a lot of what Matt Patricia does, zone blitzing. Okay. So this could be Arvell Reese and this could be Sonny Styles, the way they're playing this. So we've been breaking down this style of defense, and now we're facing it. So hats off to the coordinator there. You see that robber coming up? That's their Caleb Downs. He did a lot of that coming up into the middle of the field. This little play last week, we ran into cover 2. And if you remember, we jammed it in against Michigan, and we barely got it in there. And I remember saying, you called it into the teeth of the defense. We call the same thing again, and we're going to try to jam it in between these linebackers. The robber has come down, and this is triple coverage, but see how the receiver stops his feet and he just waits there? He's got to come back. He's got to run back to this ball like his life depends on it. It's a small coaching point, but that's what allows, and that's a heck of an interception. He comes over the back and kind of rips that out of there. That's almost a desire play by the Indiana player, like where he wanted that ball, really bad. Okay, so again, you see this cover 2 or cover 4 pre-shell. The linebackers are in a very vanilla form underneath, but it's not a vanilla defense. And that's what Matt Patricia will do to people. Linebacker walks up, you see the X stun off the edge at the top. There's an under-over coverage there with Jeremiah Smith. You see the guy in the flats is going to come underneath, and you have a guy over the top. So he's essentially doubled. And then you're going to have linebackers underneath in the cover 2 over the top here. But you see, again, you're going to see the rotation of this secondary, which they hide this cover 3 look. So it's something that it took Ohio State a couple plays to beat, and we'll see how they beat it here in a second. The first look, you can see where it's covered up. His hand's up. He thinks he's open, but this robber would come across and pick that off. So it's a good thing that Julian didn't do that. The tight end coming across, it'd be tricky to jam that in there. You got a corner who's coming down, and then, they've got that. The other route you can't see on the screen isn't there. The pass protection's there to go through the third look. Right here, you're on your fourth look, and I'm sorry, no protection really holds that long. I know our tackle will take heat for giving up a sack where he could have held that block longer, but I think Julian had his time to process that play. So is it fair to say coverage sack more than offensive line sack? Okay, but because our offensive line's taking some heat, so I don't want to pin all of the sacks on them, which this was a high sack total for us. Motion to trips here, and I like this number 37 at tight end. He was a player. He's a player that stood out to me. But the coaching point of this place, that foot of that receiver is planning to go backwards, and you see Styles trigger. That is as good as you can do it. He reads it. It was coached up, and boy, I mean, it could have been a pick to the house by him. We get the lucky break, and it's a pick to us. But hats off to Styles for the triggering ability there and the read and recognition. Okay. That cover 4 shell down and get around the goal line, or is it cover 2? You see 4 linebackers. This is very Ohio State-esque. The top linebackers blitzing, the bottom one's dropping out in the flats, and that's your pretty standard cover 2 coverage. I mean, if you were drawing it up in day 1 of camp, that's basic cover 2. You try to beat cover 2 down the middle, and when they call Tampa 2, and I'll pause this is Derek Brooks for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers running as fast as any receiver down the middle. And they execute that perfectly. And that allows these safeties now to focus and double the outside receivers. So essentially you got a guy in his face, a guy over the top, a guy in his face, a guy over the top. If you can just handle this tight end down the middle, cover 2 is really tough to beat down here near the goal line. The second look for Julian here in this cover 2 is you see all the 5 defenders that kind of set up around the goal line. The next window is blocked. You want to throw that slant to Tate, but you'd have to throw it right through a defender. But Tate does hustle his butt across the field, and he's going to come into play late here. Julian, he just panics a second before Bo Jackson turns around. Bo Jackson's got his back towards him. As soon as Julian leaves, Bo Jackson's like, hey, I'm wide open. So that's okay. Good job by Julian breaking contain here. And this is where the Carnell Tate hustles, where he blows through to the other side of the field and pops wide open because everyone else has their toes on the goal line. He kind of sneaks in behind that wave.
Really quick. The photographer next to me, if you go back just like a second there on that clip, okay. Carnell Tate actually steps on the photographer's knee next to me right there. I don't know if it'll show in that clip. Okay, so the guy in the red right there. Yep, that's me.
Yeah, there you go.
Carnell Tate goes in to celebrate with the fans. He runs through. He sees, I assume, one of his friends in the stands. Just runs in there and celebrates. And unfortunately, my buddy photographer next to me gets a cleat to the knee. But he laughed it off, and we took a photo of it, and it was all good. I normally never interrupt Mark when he's on a roll, but I just thought I had to add a little flavor to that.
When you and your buddy are on national TV, it's worth mentioning. It's funny. I watch a lot of high school film, and when I see the games I was at that night, I'm always like, oh, yeah, there I am. I'm on the sidelines. There I am behind the camera. So that's kind of cool. Okay. So this is the first time Ohio State's going to get a beat on this cover 4, cover 2 shell. What they've been doing is bringing up a safety every time. And they're making you think he's going to double, but this time he's going to get caught coming up. And it's like you're waiting for that one-on-one all game with Jeremiah Smith. When are they going to give us the chance to do it? And there it is. You're going to see this secondary rotate here in a second. Now, we assume he's going to win all his one-on-ones versus man-to-man coverage, or it's going to be at least worth a 50-50 bowl. Why is this DB flat-footed standing face at like how do you cover someone running full speed when you're looking at them? I mean, you should be in a half turn or a full turn. It's called even leaving. It's called deeper than the deepest. These are middle school terms you use. There's no way the best receiver in college football should ever be that wide open. I thought he was going to go. I can't believe this guy got it. Yeah,
when he got scored a touchdown on that play.
Yeah, I felt like that was a Calvin Johnson just going to blow through everything. It's weird how something that finite can trip you up as an athlete when you're running full speed. Okay, more of the Indiana defense, same theme. Cover 2, cover 4, linebackers underneath. You see one of the linebackers walked up there, and they're going to bring some heat here. Arvell Reese did this early in the season, and he was famous for it. Remember when he faked that blitz, and the lineman had to honor him, and then he dropped out?
Texas.
Very similar technique. Guys, it's scary how much this Indiana defense is like the Ohio State defense. It's like almost they're doing the same things. Okay, last week we kept running this play where this guy would kind of run interference. He'd run into the guy, and we'd come right off his butt. I think we had it wide open 3 or 4 times last week. Indiana has an adjustment for that. They're going to drop out both of their middle linebacker and their nose man here. Here, this middle linebacker is going to drop because they're running a mirrored concept on both sides, so Julian could read either side and have the same play. He's going to be standing there for that slant. Because he has this guard kind of worried about him, that's going to let this guy come off the edge. The tackle's late to get out there. We could blame the offensive line for not stepping out there a little sooner on this one. But this nose man dropping out late is right in the window where you want to throw this ball. So hats off to an Indiana defense here. Was it lucky, or did they see that same concept we broke down last week and said, hey, we can't let that beat us? And, they were there for it. Unfortunately, Indiana's got so many guys in coverage, there's nothing there, and it becomes a sack. Now, that was a well-dialed-up blitz off the edge and, well executed. So, Indiana on defense, guys, when you see them a second time, I think you're much more prepared for this. Okay, so like all the time Ryan Day spent recruiting and, other people spent doing other things, they're going to be a little more dialed in. When Ohio State knows it's run, like on 4th and 2, we've seen them bring out the 5-man defensive line. Everyone's hands are in the dirt. And this is when they go cover 1 or play man-to-man and, have one safety over the top. So if you're going to take a shot at Ohio State, this is it. These guys have the guys man-to-man across from them. But if they crisscross or go to their side, the middle linebackers have to switch responsibility. So I try to point that out. Like when you teach young kids, the middle linebackers can't really be man-to-man. They got to take first back to their side. Now, when play action hits here, how does Arvell Reese and the other linebacker not honor it on 4th and 2? So they're going to get the step down. But truly, if they have man-to-man coverage, here comes the guy from the opposite side against Arvell. Arvell does a good job of recognizing this. He sees it in a hurry, and he's getting there, but you only need 2 or 3 yards. It's not like you could possibly shut that down for a lost yardage play. So can we give credit to Indiana again and the coaching staff for catching us in man-to-man and doing the crisscross thing? I've used that play many times against young kids who are in man-to-man where you crisscross the running backs and guys come wide open for touchdowns. I mean, for Arvell to be within a step there, I don't want to put too much heat on him. That's one heck of an assignment. Honor the dive.
The move tight end is like the go-to 3rd and short play in NFL too.
And you could see Arvell was coached up to see it. It's not like the guy went out there wide open, untouched. He just has to honor the zone fake on 4th and 2. Okay, again, we're going to see them on their cover 4 shell. And you can see the corners are back a little bit there. You see the linebackers, and they're going to bring heat off the edge again, just like they did on the last play. We'll let this roll here. Now, we have the perfect play called to beat this heat off the edge. I mean, it should be just throw it over the blitzer. Carnell Tate does not have his head around. Julian's cocked and ready to fire. So this is on Carnell Tate. Your head should have been back looking there. There's no one covering you. The running back here, you don't want your 3rd down running back on a linebacker. That's just that's not going to be a win for the Buckeyes drawn up on the chalkboard, let alone in real life. So, you said, Dan, a lot of sacks, but coverage sacks, running back sacks, receiver not having his head around sacks. Are we going to throw all that on the offensive line and say, oh, we need new starters? No, it's a confluence of events, that you could have very easily seen Carnell catch that and run for a touchdown. You could have seen some of those other things maybe go another way. That's why we like breaking all this down and giving the Bucknutters things to think about. And the second half will be a great breakdown too. I mean, we're giving you guys double doses for these bigger games because we know how important this time of the year is, and it's fun to break down these games. I can't wait for the playoffs. It was the most fun I had last year breaking down those last 4 games.
Yes, that was fun. Those last 4 games were very fun to watch you break down. I'll say this. Do we think Kurt Cignetti may have been obsessed with Ohio State over the last year and spent a lot of extra time on that, whereas Ohio State maybe spent their extra time worrying about an Ann Arbor trip?
Well, they've been preparing for these guys for 4 weeks. I mean, they knew that they were going to be in the Big Ten title game. So, yeah, I'm sure that
but I think the lingering of last year.
Oh, yeah.
And that Cignetti, I don't know, say he got embarrassed by Ohio State, but he got, let's say, deflated. And so, look, man, it kind of felt like, it's going to sound simple. It just did feel kind of like they wanted it more than Ohio State. I realize that sounds almost so basic and stupid at this level, but it's not that hard to get to that.
Dan, I completely agree with you. Once the clock hit 0 and Jeremiah made that crazy Hail Mary catch it with like 3 or 4 defenders on him and still made the catch. Granted, it didn't really make a difference, but Indiana players just went hog wild, and I mean they should. I mean, when was the last time Indiana ever won the Big Ten championship? You have to go back almost 80, 90 years. Anyway, but I saw an Indiana offensive lineman like tears streaming down his face, sprinting into the stands. I jumps into it with who I assume is his mother, and just does like I hate using this term because I don't like this team, but a Lambo leap into the stands, and his mom is just crying too, and they're hugging, and there's just all kinds of scenes like that. And if you take aside the fact that you're not pleased that Ohio State lost, you're like, this is a really cool story, man. I mean, it's good for the Big Ten. And yes, I know, Dan, you're just seething as we speak. Like, I don't like losing. I get it. Believe me. But from a 30,000 foot view, Indiana.
If I'm being totally honest, I did not feel look, I hate losing. That's a given. But it just didn't feel like the last loss. I'll say this, Garrick, you got very up close and personal with short yardage over the weekend. That 1 yard for the Buckeyes or the Bears can be very challenging.
They can
in short yardage. That's the one thing I said yesterday. I think I'm not trying to blow smoke here for Garrick, just to let everyone know. But and the short yardage stuff will be on part 2, which is very cool from Mark. But getting that 1 yard in football now has become something there's some things that are going on in football now that I'm not familiar with. One is your running back is standing up 2 yards down the field. The entire team pushes him the next 6 yards. That's become routine. That did not exist, I don't feel like, before a few years ago. Maybe I'm wrong. I blame the tush push. And then the ability to get 1 yard in football has become super challenging. The coach of the Bears, in my opinion, is the offensive mastermind du jour, and they lost it on 4th and 1 over the weekend. So maybe there's something we don't know about. All right. We will get to more of that in the future. Let's take a look back now quickly, Garrick, at signing day. You are not going to have to go into a mental institution after it, despite the fact that you had to follow the ups and the downs.
You say that now.
Currently, every day is a challenge. I jested with you that Legend Bay and Chris Henry were actually employees of Bucknuts because they committed, they decommitted, and they're going to both end up at Ohio State, in my opinion. And so no worse for the wear, just 5 or 6 stories that got millions of page views and helped our bottom line. But can you kind of wrap everything up as you see it? you want to please address the Chris Henry and Legend Bay stuff going forward, and then kind of where we are with recruiting. And then we'll, going forward, I guess we'll talk transfer portal here in a week or so.
Sure. Man, sum up the last week. I would need probably 2 weeks of sleep and a few cocktails to fully do that in a way that appeases the masses. But all right, so our Wednesday show, and I knew this was going to happen. The second you say it, I'm expecting a pretty quiet day, barring anything unexpected. At least I did hedge and say barring anything unexpected. But as soon as I said expecting an uneventful day, what was it, 20 minutes after we hang up the pod, Brian Hartline announces he's leaving for South Florida. And then I went, oh, no.
Real quick, after we all said that would never happen, 20 minutes later it happened.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Just
we weren't alone in that one, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you this. I did not hear one person, even the word South never came up. The word Florida never came up. The word Heartline never came up. That might be the first time in the history that I did not hear one. Now, we could be uninformed. That's very doubtful. But I did not hear one thing about that. So go ahead, Garrick. I'm sorry.
I was scolded for mentioning his name at Penn State.
See, but that wasn't true. That's why people said that. Like there was a knowledge that that wasn't true. The South, I mean, I think that's a story for another day. We'll do a retrospective on that at some point.
Anyway, so when that news breaks, I'm like, guys, Chris Henry's supposed to announce in 30 minutes. What the hell's going to happen here? So I'm on my way to the Woody Hayes Athletic Center for Mark Pantoni and Ryan Day's press conference, while also I am just trying to navigate it so I can get there in time to watch Chris Henry announce. And I just barely make it. I pull up the ceremony on my phone, and then he says, I'm staying with Ohio State. And I'm like, wow, okay. All right, cool. Posted our draft, and then I had to update it a couple minutes later. Like, well, let's wait for the paperwork to come in before we say the I's and T's are dotted, right? But and then the signature never came. It wasn't there. It wasn't in the Buckeyes' hands by the time Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni took the podium. And eventually he told 247 Sports' Tom Loy that he's still considering his options while they're on the National Signing Day show. And his options included Oregon. They included USC. But once teams smelled blood in the water, they had LSU reach out. They had Texas reach out. SEC teams were trying to get involved in this recruitment late down the stretch as Chris Henry Jr. was trying to ultimately decide where he wanted to end up. Now, this was a wild saga, guys, because on Wednesday I was in contact and we were hearing some things. And one source told me, or told us, I should say, that they wouldn't be surprised if they kept both Jerquaden Guilford and Chris Henry. And then I was like, oh, okay, sounds pretty optimistic. And then another was like, no chance. more or less, like, I don't think they can keep both of them. So I'm like, okay, so in short, nobody knows anything. Great. And that's the hard part if you want to play recruiting analyst on TV, that it's so hard to keep track of, and everyone has different opinions on things and people that are very connected to the source. And ultimately, sometimes you just have to be honest with your readers and say, listen, man, I don't even think the kid knows what he wants to do yet. But I will give Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni a lot of credit, and even Brian Hartline some credit to an extent, because he still was in contact with Chris Henry and saying, look, man, I think Ohio State's still the best place for you, even if I'm not going to be there. But Ryan Day took the charge on this, talked with Henry multiple times from what I understand. I will say Wednesday there was some optimism with Ohio State, but there was a ton of optimism with Oregon. And then on Thursday there was an enormous amount of optimism from Oregon and very little optimism, bordering on pessimism from Ohio State. And then Friday morning, I think Chris Henry made it up his mind before he even told Ohio State. And an hour later, he's on the Pat McAfee show announcing that he's going to sign with Ohio State. So I thought it was really fun watching I don't know if you guys saw or not, but the Chris Henry conversations with Ryan Day when he told him that he was signing with him for real this time. And then Brian Hartline also FaceTiming the Henry family and saying, look, man, I'm so happy you made that decision. But ultimately, it wasn't a knee buckler, Jeremiah Smith, so we didn't have quite the clip that went viral that we did a couple years ago. But ultimately, I'll say this to try to put a bow on Chris Henry. I remember saying a couple years ago when a lot of fans had recruiting fatigue about Jeremiah Smith, was he visiting this place? Wasn't he? Was he going to sign? Wasn't he? It's just a back and forth. One day you feel good. The next day you don't feel good. I'm over this. It's hard to follow, blah, 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 blah. And believe me, I get it. I also needed to take a deep breath a couple times on Wednesday through Friday to be like, all right, where are we at? But summing up, is anyone going to care how messy this recruitment was when Chris Henry Jr. is catching touchdowns at Ohio Stadium next fall? And like I said, it was anyone going to care when Jeremiah Smith started making one-handed catches in Ohio Stadium? Like, they're like, you know what? I don't think I can enjoy it quite as much. His recruitment wasn't as fun to follow. So at the end of the day, Ohio State secured the signature of Chris Henry Jr. They got him in the fold, and he's going to be a tremendous player at Ohio State with or without Brian Hartline. I fully believe that. I've seen Chris Henry Jr. a lot. I believe in the player. I believe in the skill set. I believe in the frame. And, gentlemen, I believe he can start year one. I'm not saying he's going to, but I believe he certainly has the talent and the skill set to start year one. And he's going to have Jeremiah there next year. He's going to have Julian Sain there next year. And it's a great situation for him to be in.
Well, I think he'll be on the field first year. The one thing we have not talked about, and Mark, I'll turn the floor over to you here in a sec. I'm one who gives credit's kind of the weird way to go about it, but Nick Saban's decision to leave Alabama and the dominoes that fell in our favor because of that were tremendous. I mean, if you just look at Caleb Downs and Seth McLaughlin and Julian Sain, not bad. Not a bad talent haul. I don't think it hurt that Oregon offensive coordinator Will Stein got the head coaching job at Kentucky, similarly to Hartline going to South Florida, because that would have been a big argument in their favor. So Will Stein and Nick Saban got a thank you from me and hopefully Buckeye Nation, because I think that move, if it didn't solidify it, it certainly was a helpful domino. All right, we're kind of running short on time here, Garrick. I'm going to do this. I got a 40-minute deadline today. So just wrap up, if you can, Garrick, the Legend Bay deal and where we are and how that will end, and maybe a quick tip on what went down there.
Oh, man, really tough to do a Spark Notes version of that, but let's do.
I know we'll eventually do a deep dive on Legend Bay, but just kind of wrap it and then let us know how it's going.
Ultimately, it's one that when you initially hear the story, you want to feel anger, but really all you can feel is just sadness.
A story, by the way, you told me about a month ago, but I digress. Go ahead.
Yeah. We've been tracking this for about a month. I was hoping it was never going to get to this point. This is like, there are just some stories in recruiting that you never hope see the light of day, even though, like Dan said, it does very well for the site. But also, I mean, you just feel for the kid with all the circumstances that surround it. Ultimately, he is signed with a place that he very clearly does not want to be. I would feel very differently if he had a last-minute change of heart and Tennessee is where he wanted to be, clearly. And for the record, I would say this if the circumstances were reversed too. If this was his inner circle really wanted him to be at Ohio State, but he really wanted to be at Tennessee, I would be pounding the tables and say, Ohio State, you need to release this kid from his letter and let him go play at Tennessee immediately. But nonetheless, I mean, guys, this is the weirdest recruitment I've ever seen. I've been doing this not quite long enough to say I'm on the same I've seen as much stuff as the dean has per se, but I've been doing it long enough to say I've seen some stuff, but I've never seen anything quite like this. You have a kid that's tweeting out, hey, my inner circle has access to all my social media accounts, and I don't want to sign with the place that I actually want to. Just letting you guys know. And then that tweet is deleted 15 minutes later. Like, where's that ever been seen before? But
it's literally a hostage situation.
Yes. All right. So we're running short on time, so I'm going to wrap this up, bring it to a head. Spark Notes. He came to his signing ceremony decked out in Ohio State gear. Thought he was signing with Ohio State. He was interviewed by, I believe, a reporter from the Dallas Morning News about Hartline's departure, and he was like, doesn't matter. Brian Day's my guy. So that excuse is already out the window because he put that in there. We get told 247 Sports' Mike Roach that he expects the paperwork to be signed by the end of the day, and they think that he's going to Ohio State. And then an hour later, he signed with Tennessee by hook or by crook somehow. Anyway, to wrap this up, and I know this is very confusing, and we need a whole show to dedicate on this if we wanted to get in the weeds, but there could be some light at the end of the tunnel. Ultimately, Legend can sign on his own when he is 18, and one of two things can happen. Either Tennessee can do the honorable thing and release him from his signed agreement, which I'd imagine they'd consider it under the circumstances, because you don't want a kid that doesn't want to be part of your program, right? Like, that is openly and publicly like that. It's just a PR nightmare. Or if for whatever reason they don't let him out of his signed agreement, there's always the transfer portal that begins on January 2nd, and no one can stop him from going where he wants to go. So ultimately, if Legend wants to be a Buckeye, he's going to be a Buckeye sooner rather than later. At this point, I would expect that he'll end up being in Ohio State, which it's kind of weird to talk about him as a Tennessee signee, because he wants to be at Ohio State. And Ohio State finished technically as the 6th-ranked recruiting class in the nation. But if you add Legend into it, they move up to 5th. So it's another top 5 recruiting class. So it's weird to say, yeah, they finished 6th overall in the country, but if they make the move that it's expected to make and that Legend transfers, they'll move up to 5th. So kind of a weird classification. Again, just to put a bow on it, really sad story. I hope that the kid and his family find some peace. I hope that things get worked out. And ultimately, I hope he ends up where he wants to end up.
Big dollars involved, and that can always make for strange events. We appreciate everybody stopping by. Have a good one. Nut.